Hello everybody, welcome back. Jim here on this decidedly cold evening, but comfortable inside my nice warm little apartment and drinking a bit of beer, taking a load off, and once again speaking to my microphone. And tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about cost of living in Japan, and in particular Tokyo, where I currently live, because this is a question that comes up quite a bit. I guess Japan, and Tokyo in particular, has a bit of a reputation for being an expensive place to live, which it certainly can be, but I think most places can be. Any major metropolitan area can be an expensive place to live. But anyway, that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Cost of living in Tokyo and how expensive, or in some cases inexpensive, it can be. So for all of you prospective travelers or people who might want to live in or around Tokyo someday, I guess this is intended for you. This is information that would have been useful for me at one point as well. But I'm basically going to be talking about two things in particular, what I think are the two most important things, which is number one, housing, because if you're going to live somewhere, first and foremost, you need a place to live, and the other would be like food and water, basically keeping yourself fed and keeping yourself in some shelter. Those are the two most important things, and then everything else you make room for. But anyway, to get started with housing, which is one thing in particular, I guess Tokyo has a reputation for being pretty expensive for, is that housing is going to be very expensive, and you're not going to get a lot for what you paid. Typically, apartments are fairly small and cramped, and there are some houses even that for houses they're quite small. It's my understanding though that housing prices have actually been going down in Japan in general as of late, which is good news for everybody. I will say that the closer you get to like a major metropolitan area or like the center of the city, like if you want to live in or around Shinjuku or Roppongi or somewhere like that, obviously the real estate around there is going to be a little more expensive. A lot of people just opt to live somewhere further outside of the city, and then usually if you're working in a commercial area like that, you commute to work, because the further you get away from those busy commercial areas, the more reasonable housing becomes. I myself live only a 10-minute train ride from Shinjuku, but the area I live in is, I guess, more suburban than you would think of when you think of Tokyo. So it's not quite so expensive. My apartment, which I've done a video tour of, is not a very big apartment, and it is $700 a month, which might seem like a lot to pay for an apartment of this size, but with its location, I would say it's fairly reasonable. I will say this, however, depending on what you're willing to settle for, you can pay extremely little for apartments in Tokyo. While I was doing some apartment hunting, I was at first looking at the cheapest options, because right now I'm a student, and so I don't exactly have the biggest bank account, so I was looking at fairly cheap options to begin with, and there were apartments listed for as little as $200 or $300 a month. But I have to say about these apartments, if the one I'm in now is small, these were very small. There was room enough in them, I'd say, for a bed, a television, and maybe a few amenities, but not much else. Essentially the size of walk-in closets. There are actually apartments available that did not have bathrooms in the apartments, or at least did not have a shower or bathtub, maybe just a toilet. And I guess the option you have there is those apartments are located in neighborhoods where there is a public bath. So if you want to pay way less for your apartment, you can get one that doesn't have a shower or bathtub in it, and you can instead opt to go use a public bathing facility. That wasn't something I really wanted to do. I was looking to save money, but I didn't want to be terribly uncomfortable. There is also the option of share houses. I do know a number of people that live in share houses. I guess they're essentially the same as a dormitory, but they seem to be pretty comfortable there. And there are rules dictating, like quiet hours and things like that. And the people there seem to be pretty respectful of those rules. So that's a cheaper option as well if you were going to live here for maybe a short period of time, a year or so. Share houses are a cheaper option as well. So there are little tiny apartments that if you're desperate enough you can live in, and you might not have a bathroom in it, but if you don't mind using a public bath, and if you don't have a whole lot of personal possessions, or you're not going to take anything with you for the time being, those are a cheap option and not necessarily permanent. You can live in one for a short period of time if you feel like that's the right fit for you, and then later move into something a little more comfortable, or share houses, which are a relatively cheap alternative as well. And with that in mind, I would also like to transition to everything else, because once you have your apartment, you obviously need to have food and water and things like that. That's another thing that can definitely be pricey in Japan. Food, if you go to, I guess, if you're the type of person that likes to eat out a lot, and which that can typically get expensive anyway, that can add up quite a bit. But there again are cheaper alternatives, and those alternatives really lie in the form of convenience stores. Whenever I am pinching pennies, I will pretty much eat food almost exclusively from 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven has pretty much everything you would want food-wise. It's just when you eat it, you bought it from 7-Eleven, but they have, bento boxes and things like that, so you can go and buy a lunchtime meal, and it'll cost you maybe $4 or $5, and then you can get that with some water. Whenever I've been being extremely cheap, most days my lunch was a packet of ham, which was 90 yen, and a packet of bread, buttered rolls, and those were also 90 yen, and a 100 yen bottle of water. So for 280 yen plus tax, so roughly around 300 yen, less than $3. That was my lunch. So I would have ham and bread and water, and doing that for a month or two, that'll help you save some money. Also, pretty much every convenience store will have kind of like a value card, or however you want to describe it, that you can get. I have one for 7-Eleven that it's called a Nanako card, but essentially you can put money on it and use it to pay for whatever you're buying at the time, and when you do so, you earn points, and those points translate into actual money. So however many points you have, you have that many yen on your card. So for instance, if I've been using my card all month, and at the end of the month I have 700 points on my card, I can tell them that I would like to charge those points back onto my card, so they'll convert it from points into yen. So that's a free 700 yen that I get on my card. And like I said, with 700 yen, that could be, if you're really pinching, that could be lunch for like 2 days, or it could just be like, whatever, maybe a 6-pack of the cheap beer they have there, the 7-Eleven brand beer, which is I think about 700 yen for a 6-pack. So that's an option that you have if you're concerned about where you're going to get your food and water and how expensive it's going to be. Or not just water, obviously anything to drink. They also have tea and soda, whatever it is you decide you want. But convenience stores are very convenient for that. Food, water. Also, you can pay your bills there. So if you charge all your points onto your point card, you can then put the yen on your card from your points. You can actually put that towards paying your bills as well. Which I guess I'll also get into that just a little bit. The utilities that you'll be charged. For me, they're not so bad at all because again, I'm one person. I live in a fairly small apartment, so on a monthly basis, my electric bill is maybe $30 and $20 for sewage and water and $20 for gas. So that's not so much. And then also the national health insurance. If you're going to be living here, you do have to pay for the national health insurance, which itself is not very expensive. I believe if you earn under a certain wage, it's like 1,700 yen a month, which is maybe like $16 or $15 a month. I think at max it goes up to about 4,900 yen a month, which is less than $50, maybe around $45 a month, and you're insured for, I'd say, 70 or 75% of all medical expenses, including dental and prescriptions. And on top of that, medical expenses in Japan are much cheaper than they are in the US anyway. I don't know about Canada or Europe. I don't really have a frame of reference for that, but I can say that medical treatment in Japan is considerably less than the United States. I've actually heard at times that it can be as much as half the cost of what you would pay in a U.S. hospital. So those are just some things to think about in terms of housing. There are some cheaper alternatives to living in a very expensive, cramped little apartment. It just depends on what you're willing to settle for and how long you want to be living here. The company I got my apartment through, I'll just tack this on. If you're only coming for a short stay, maybe 2 or 3 months, they actually have contracts that you can sign where they will let you have the apartment for those 3 months. And if you want to, you can pay that rent all in advance. And some of the apartments, they will even include the utilities in that charge, and then you can kind of just use the utilities indiscriminately after that. But that's something to think about, the extent of your stay and what kind of accommodations you feel like you could live with, especially if you don't intend to be at your apartment very much anyway. You might as well just go for a cheaper option and use that money you saved to have yourself some fun in the city. But so there are cheaper living options. There's the cheaper apartments, and there's share housing, and there's short stays and stuff like that. And then as far as where you're going to get your food and beverages and other sustenance, convenience stores are your best and cheapest friend. And also things like utilities and medical care and things to that effect. Those things can be fairly inexpensive as well, as long as you are fairly conservative with those things. So yes, Japan and Tokyo in particular can be an expensive enough place to live if you're the type of person that spends a lot of money. But if you're the type of person that conserves your money fairly well, and you're not so discriminant when it comes to where you live and what you eat, and it can actually be a fairly reasonable place to live. You don't have to break the bank necessarily. I myself am doing pretty well on not a huge salary right now, but hey, I'm not homeless and I'm not hungry, so that's good news. Anyway, everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this. If you do plan to come out here to stay for a while, or perhaps even live, I hope this is kind of helpful. I hope it gave you a few things to think about. There's so much more I could talk about in terms of living here and spending what amount on what kinds of things, but I don't want this video to be, an hour, 2 hours long. So I'm just gonna cut it here by saying thank you, everybody, for listening and subscribing, liking, commenting, all those nice things. It's always appreciated. And until next time, take care, everybody. Goodbye.